All right, cool. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about how we leveled up the data engineering experience at Riot Games. My name is Marco. I'm a software engineer at Riot Games.
My name is Zach. I'm also a software engineer at Riot Games.
So most people probably know Riot for League of Legends, but over the years, our portfolio has grown far beyond that. We've expanded to titles like Valorant and Teamfight Tactics, Wild Rift, Legends of Runeterra. We also have a new fighting game that just released, 2XKO, that's in early access. But Riot isn't just about games anymore. We've also branched out into music, comic books, animation, notably with Arcane on Netflix. And so as we build more for our players and our fans, it's that much more important to really try to understand them, how they play, what they care about, what keeps them engaged. And for us, data plays a critical role in that. Right? It's our mission at Riot to be the most player-focused game company in the world, and for us to live up to that mission, we really need to empower our developers across the company to be able to confidently and effectively work with data. And that's where our team comes in. We focus on building the data platform and crafting the developer experience around it. And for us, DBT has started to become a really key part of that experience. It's helping us bring more people into the development process, achieve insights faster, and ultimately better serve our millions of players around the world. First, we're going to rewind a bit and talk a little bit about what led us to DBT in the first place. And by the way, when we talk about an SDLC in this presentation, the software development lifecycle, we're referring to the end-to-end process of developing data workflows. Basically, it's the full environment that our developers work in, from writing code to getting that logic into production to making sure it runs reliably. And so since 2021, we've supported an SDLC that's based on Airflow, Databricks, and PySpark. It's enabled us to power a wide range of use cases across the company with contributions from more than 130 Rioters. And you can see some additional stats on the slide. But it's been a powerful and flexible system that served us well for many years. But as Riot has grown and our data needs have expanded, we really started to feel some of that strain in our systems. We had many pipelines that were bespoke, which made it really hard to reuse and standardize. We had a lot of PySpark notebooks that gave us flexibility, but they're really hard to test and to maintain. There's also a really high barrier of entry for our analysts and data engineers that are looking to start working with data. So we believe we could offer something better for our developers, and that's when we started to explore what could come next. And of course, DBT is what came next. Right? And what really excited about DBT initially was how it brought some of those traditional software engineering principles like testing, modularity, and version control into the data space. Right? And at Riot, we wanted to see what the hype was about. Right? So last year, we started prototyping a few different workflows using DBT, and really quickly we started to realize that it gave us something that we didn't really have before, which was a unified, scalable foundation for modeling data. And in practice, what we saw was a streamlined development process through SQL, which meant that now our analysts could build production-grade models without having to learn all these other technologies like PySpark or Airflow. We also got built-in testing, which allowed us to validate assumptions and catch issues early and just be able to ship more reliable pipelines. But for us, the real first test for DBT at Riot was 2XKO, which I mentioned, our new fighting game. And because it was a brand new title, the team was really eager to start generating insights as early as possible to help guide development. The 2XKO team started with a blank slate. They had no legacy pipelines, they had no existing data warehouse, so it really gave them a unique opportunity to ask the bold question of what if we built our data warehouse from day one using DBT? And the team really stepped up to that challenge, and the results have been really impressive. In just a few short months, they were able to stand up a full production-grade analytics stack. They deployed over 150 models, which supported a lot of the early playtest analytics. And those early insights helped the team make meaningful data-driven decisions during the development process and helped shape that player experience long before the game launched. The 2XKO team also didn't just validate our approach around DBT, it also started to set a new standard for how teams at Riot could build with data. It was also the catalyst for the further adoption of DBT across the company. Another area where DBT really started to prove its value early was in R&D. At Riot, R&D teams operate a little bit differently from some of our other game teams. Right? It's their mission to rapidly prototype new game concepts and then pivot quickly when something isn't working. And historically, these R&D teams operate really lean. They don't have a lot of resources to embedded data engineers who, prior to DBT, were essential just to build the most basic data pipeline. And so, as a result, analytics often became bottleneck. Right? For these R&D games, insights often came too late or sometimes not at all. And with DBT, we're able to start to flip that dynamic. Using mostly SQL, or analysts could now start building directly in the transformation layer without having to wait on engineering support to build these pipelines. Right? They could define models, they could test assumptions, they could iterate rapidly. And that agility is really important in the early stage development, early stage development where telemetry and schema changes constantly. Right? And so having tools that can move as fast as our game ideas do is really important. And now that once we had 2xKO and these R&D teams start to show what was possible with DBT, other teams at Riot started to take notice of the accessibility, the speed, the flexibility that DBT brought to data workflows. And so today, DBT is starting to be used across some of our larger teams at Riot. Recently, the data engineering team that supports League of Legends and teamfight tactics ran an evaluation of DBT to understand what it would look like for them to build their data pipelines in DBT instead of our legacy SDLC. And the results from the evaluation were compelling enough for them to now commit to use DBT for all their new pipeline work, and they've also started work to migrate some of their legacy pipelines to DBT as well. But it's also not just our game teams, we also have teams working with social data, helping them better understand player interactions. We have teams working with publishing data to power campaign performance tracking. Our own team uses DBT to better understand developer operations, giving us visibility into CI/CD telemetry and platform health. We also have teams building DBT models using enterprise data to power internal operations at Riot. We have folks working with finance data to power cost-saving efforts. So you can see at this point, DBT has become a really foundational part of our data stack at Riot, and one of those default tools that teams reach for when they spin up new data workflows. And now I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Zach, who's going to talk a little bit about the technical details of how we're using DBT at Riot.
Thank you, Marco. Good morning, everybody. The move from the legacy SDLC to our new DBT SDLC was not just a change in technology, it was also a change in philosophy. We wanted to expand the community of contributors to include analysts and other data professionals at Riot to be able to contribute to our overall data ecosystem. This shift in philosophy helped us orient our framework for the new DBT SDLC. How can we automate and standardize as much as possible? In order to facilitate this, we structured our DBT platform around a multi-project monolithic repository with robust CI/CD practices. Then we tackled the following. 1, orchestration. How can we automatically generate DAGs that will run our DBT models with Astronomer Cosmos? 2, how can we integrate our BI tools into this new SDLC with automatic data exports to Tableau? 3, how can we standardize common macros across multiple projects using a common macros package that our team develops and the community helps maintain? 4, how can we integrate with our existing vendors, such as Atlan, our data discovery platform? And 5, how can we maintain observability and monitoring to ensure operational efficiency for this new SDLC platform? These are things that our team has worked really, really hard to accomplish and to invest into this new platform to make it easy for everybody to contribute. Since we enabled this platform in 2024, we've onboarded a number of contributors who in turn have created a number of DBT models. These stats that you see here are just a fraction of our overall data population, and we're actively working on moving more customers to the new SDLC. As I mentioned, one of our key objectives with the new DBT SDLC was to increase the amount of contribution from other data practitioners at Riot. Historically, we've seen pretty low engagement from any non-data engineers in our ecosystem. You can see there roughly 2.5% of commits made to our legacy SDLC were from non-engineers. After the investment that we've made into the new platform and onboarding and migrating new users, we can clearly see that we're well on our way to achieving our goal. We have increased our contribution from our data analyst and other data disciplines into our data pipelining ecosystem by roughly 10x, which is huge. We've also made some other efficiencies and other upgrades. So dbt and SQL warehouses have opened up new opportunities for operational efficiency in our data platform. Some of the areas we've been tracking is the time and compute overhead we can eliminate by moving off of our legacy Spark-based pipelines. And a key enabler of that shift has been dbt's SQL-based approach. Because dbt operates entirely in SQL, we were able to move our transformation workloads from Spark clusters to SQL warehouses and Databricks, something that we wouldn't have been able to do with our legacy SDLC. This transition allowed us to eliminate cluster spin-up times and Python dependency installs, steps that previously added several minutes to every job. Just by removing that overhead, we estimate a 17% reduction in setup time per run. And when you scale that across 3,000 jobs per day, the time savings get pretty significant. As we continue to scale the dbt adoption across teams, we expect these improvements to drive reduced operational overhead and cost savings through more efficient compute usage. But we didn't want to just assume that dbt was working well. So earlier this year, we did everybody's favorite thing, and we sent out a survey. We surveyed engineers and analysts who had used both our legacy system and the new dbt SDLC, and to us, the feedback was pretty clear. We saw better reported developer velocity, writing tests was much easier, the local development experience was better, and modularity and code reuse had improved greatly. But these weren't just vanity metrics, right? These translate directly into faster time to insights, fewer bugs, and most importantly, happier teams. But we haven't stopped there. We've been hard at work moving on to dbt's newest features, fusion and state-aware orchestration. We expect state-aware orchestration to lead to more agency being handed to our data producers and data consumers that leads to faster and more efficient pipelines. We also believe Fusion will enable our developers to have more tools at their disposal to develop more efficiently with features including the in-editor feedback and faster project compile times. So what's next for us? We're not anywhere close to being done. The next step for us is migration and adoption. We'll be working with our customer teams to migrate all of our legacy pipelines to the new platform, relying on the new dbt technologies with the MCP server and the dbt agents to help facilitate these efforts. We'll also be exploring other features dbt has to offer, such as the dbt mesh, the semantic layer, and exposures. But we want to thank you guys for taking the time to join us today. We wanted to leave a significant chunk of time for questions, and we want to say GG's and have a great rest of the conference. So I think at this point, if there are any questions, we'll be up here and we'll be going around with a microphone, if there are any.
Hi there. Hi there. I'm curious what the hardest part of the migration to the new SDLC is, particularly given you had so much legacy code moving it into a new workflow.
Yeah, that's a great question. Just for those who may not have heard, what is the most difficult part of moving our legacy system to the new dbt SDLC? I think for us, we've been building in the legacy SDLC for a number of years, right? And the flexibility of our previous system, which was Databricks notebooks orchestrated by Airflow DAGs, was the amount of flexibility that offered, right? So dbt has a very rigid, everything has to be in SQL. With notebooks, you can have Python, you can have just SQL, you can have pretty much whatever, right? And so standardizing how we can migrate all of those different implementations to a new standard framework has been kind of challenging. We've actually worked on a few different projects to help automate that, and that's why we're really excited for like the MCP server and the dbt agents to help kind of analyze what we have in our backlog to see how much of that we can automate and auto-translate to dbt models. So that's kind of what we're going to be exploring next. Did that answer your question? Yeah, of course. Any other questions? Sure, yeah.
Hi, thanks for sharing. I have two questions. The first one is that, so when we introduce more analysts into the dbt model development, and I'm a data engineer, and I find that a lot of data analysts, they tend to build more models, and generally you don't care much about the performance tuning, and they tend to add more resources. and computing resources, and it's become more and more expensive. So I'm just wondering, so in this transition, in Riot Games, which team will check the performance tuning when there are more and more models here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the first question. Second question is that so when you turn from job cluster, I guess, in Databricks and to warehouse, right? So warehouse. So did you have any severe problem there? Because I'm also trying to do the same thing in my company. Yeah.
Okay. Great questions. If I can just go ahead and say those back to you. So question one, as we've expanded the number of contributors to our data ecosystem, how do we maintain performance across the expanded group of people that can contribute, right? That's your first question. And I think that's a really good question, but I also don't think it's unique to DBT, right? I think the question at the heart of that is, as we grow the number of people that can contribute, how do we maintain standards and performance regardless of who those contributors are, right? And I don't know if that's a technological problem to solve. I think that that's a people and a process problem to solve. I think that's how we've done it, is through our pretty rigid code review process. We also have really good and robust CI/CD pipelines to help measure performance and give those contributors the insights that they need to see the performance of their jobs, right? Generally what we found, if you tell people how long something takes and it's too long, they'll do the work to make it shorter and make it more performant. So that's how we've tackled that one. Your second question around our transition to SQL warehouses from our previous system. So our previous system used ephemeral job clusters in Databricks, and so we created a job cluster per run. The move to SQL warehouses was not just a move to SQL warehouses. We also used serverless under the hood with Databricks, and so we got a lot of faster spin-up time. Since all we're executing with DBT is SQL, and that's what SQL warehouses are for, we really didn't run into a number of problems with that. We got pretty much just benefit, but I'll also say that we don't necessarily manage Databricks at Riot. That's a adjacent team to us, so they may have more insight into the problems that we faced. So, yeah, of course. Yeah, this gentleman.
Hey, did y'all face any issues? And if you did, kind of like what paths did y'all take in terms of merging the orchestration between like Airflow and DBT? Like, what did that look like? You know,
that's a great question. For those who may not have heard, how did we manage orchestration between DBT and Databricks and Airflow? Do you want to?
Sure. I mean, initially, we were already using Databricks, right, with our scheduling Databricks notebooks. Our initial approach was actually with dbt core, and so we weren't on cloud yet, so we didn't have jobs for scheduling. So our first approach was to use Airflow with dbt core. We also wanted it to be reduce the effort on analysts, right? Because we don't want them all to know how. Like now you have to build DAGs, and that's another barrier of entry, right? So we actually built like a custom framework around. You could write YAML, and we would generate the Airflow DAGs for you. And so we try to keep everything like configuration-based YAML, declarative in our system. Since then, we've moved to dbt cloud, and we still felt there was like significant effort in terms of like going into Airflow, context switching. So we actually started moving away from that, and we're working on moving completely off of Airflow to dbt cloud to jobs because of the state of orchestration feature. You can actually use a declarative method of like setting freshness for each model. So it was very similar to what we were already doing. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. To expand on what Marco mentioned there, our custom Airflow framework actually had users tagging models with a frequency that they wanted to run, and then we would generate basically a DAG per frequency per project. But we had predefined frequencies like hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, which then we were really surprised when DBT announced SAO, and it's basically the same thing where you can define a freshness, and so we got kind of the benefits of the custom framework that we had built and a platform that gives everybody kind of like a one pane of glass experience. So. Yeah, thank you. That was a good question. I think this gentleman here in the front.
Thank you. My question is related, I guess, and please forgive me if you guys have already answered that.
That's fine.
It sounds to me that in your legacy system, all the logic of execution or the DAG was in Airflow, right? I am also in the process of moving to DBT and orchestrating using Airflow, but what I keep thinking is I should not put that logic in Airflow, but just let simply the DAG in DBT to dictate the order of execution.
Yeah.
What was your experience in that regard? Because I am now hearing that you're also saying that you created something to kind of translate that DAG into Airflow.
Yeah.
Or why not just to let DBT dictate the order of execution and probably using tagging or something like that?
Yeah. That's a great question. At the time that we were building out that framework, there was a Python package for Airflow developed by the company Astronomer called Cosmos, which lets you take all of your dbt projects and it'll automatically build a task per model kind of implementation of a DAG in Airflow. And so we opted to use that strategy instead of running like dbt fully in an individual like pod in Airflow. I don't really remember why we made that decision, but Cosmos worked out really well for us for quite a while. As we moved from the legacy SDLC to the new dbt SDLC, we wanted to give users a interface that was familiar. So they were very used to Airflow with the legacy SDLC, and so by having Airflow with the new one, it helped with that transition. Hopefully that answers your question, but yeah, of course. This gentleman over here.
Hi. I have two questions for you.
Okay.
On the topic of guardrails and onboarding new analysts, can you tell me about your CI/CD process and how you basically ensure quality code and people are adhering to, for example, building their models and ensuring they work?
Yeah. For those that didn't hear, how did we, as part of our robust CI/CD, how do we ensure quality? If I got that right. Yeah. So we tackled this in a number of ways. One, we built like a custom rules engine that runs during CI/CD, so we can basically define a rule like all models should have an owner. All models should write to one of these few catalogs in Databricks. All of the models should have whatever, right? And we were able to enforce a lot of like metadata and configuration qualities that way. When it comes to like the quality of the code itself, a lot of that still comes down to manual review, right? I mean, that's why we have code reviews. We have a pretty comprehensive code owner split, and so there are only certain people that can review code, and we rely on those reviewers to help ensure quality and correctness, right? Because Marco and I don't know everything about every domain, right?
Sure. Let me ask, do you use anything like a CI setup on pull request to run a certain like state modified?
Yeah. We and actually Marco built this with our multi-project monolithic repo. Unfortunately, DBT's current CI integration doesn't work well. It'll build every project on every PR, and so we kind of had to reconfigure that where we built individual projects based off of what was changed in that PR. But we will build the select state modified for a given PR in the isolated PR schema, so that we know that everything will build, right? And two, if our customers want to view like what that data looks like in a semi-production state, they can.
Yeah, that's great. And my last question is, it's on the same exact topic, but we find with onboarding a lot of new analysts or analytic engineers that they have a lot of trouble with state management, with deferral and what's in their local versus what was built and how it works. Are you running into that problem at all? And if so, how do you solve it?
Yeah, that's a good question. How do we manage basically environment state? I think we do a number of things. So one, whenever developers are developing in like the Studio IDE, they're pretty much locked down to just working in development states. So we have basically a Databricks catalog that all of our dbt development goes into. That's also where all of our CI schemas are created.
Do you have them use defer at all?
Yeah, we used like defer to production,
yeah.
in a lot of our stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to say, in my organization, we have the staging environment in DBT and the production.
Yeah.
Deferral prioritizes staging. And that's been a problem with state management because we don't run staging as frequently as production.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's been up to the analyst to handle their state in their local development schemas. I'm in Snowflake, by the way. So, and their schemas would frequently get stale, and staging wasn't run frequently. So it was, it currently is a challenge.
Interesting.
I haven't really been using staging that much, to be honest.
Well, you're dodging that bullet. So, another company forewent to the staging environment tag and just had a separate environment that wasn't tagged that way. So deferral always looked at production. So,
Interesting.
yeah, thank you.
I was also going to, going to your first question, just remembering, there's also a package that DBT has called Project Validator, and that's something we've been looking into. It gives you, for example, code coverage or test coverage, documentation coverage for your project, and additional recommendations. So that's something we're working actively to populate up and make that part of the PR process. Yeah. Zach had also mentioned there's a custom rules engine that we run. The way we kind of analyze the models, we use the dbt API to download the manifest file, and we basically statically analyze that file and check to see those additional guardrails that we want.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool. All right, I think we've got one more question over here, and maybe we'll call it there.
It's on? Okay, thank you. I'm coming with Jinx, so I think I should have a question to you guys.
Nice.
So when you just mentioned, I saw you mention in your presentation, when actually I have the question on my phone, I write down my question. So you just mentioned that the contribution from the data analyst or the ending user, business users, increased from 2% to about 21, 22% after adopting DBT, right? And with more and more users, including the business users, getting involved in the contribution, how do you ensure the quality of the models? Because do you have any review or approval process in place before users can create a PR or merge that into production? Because we have some, actually, we have some, we have a lot of business user, any user you contribute in our DBT models. And we found a lot of model, this user created model A, and another user created model B. Actually, they're doing the same thing. So how do we control that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't know that we've fully solved that, right?
Yeah.
So I think what you're talking about is model overlap, right, and model deduplication and such. And I think as we move folks to the new SDLC and onto the new platform, that's kind of the next area that we want to tackle. So Riot has been around for over 15 years at this point, so we've got a lot of a data backlog, right? And over that time, there has been bloat of two people have built the same model or the same Databricks notebook to process the same data. Our first priority is to get people onto DBT, and then once we're there, is to analyze and see how we can reduce that overlap, reduce that bloat, to be more efficient. Unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for you right there because we're also trying to figure that out. So,
For what it's worth, too, it sounds like MCP server might help some of those challenges. Something that some of the DBT folks mentioned as some tool we could use.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and call it there. We really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you have a good rest of your conference. Thank you.